The bill arrived at 8:47 in the evening. I know the exact time because I had been watching the clock since approximately 7:15, which was when the third bottle of wine was opened, and I had begun doing the particular arithmetic that a woman who has spent 30 years managing household finances does automatically when she understands that a situation has moved beyond its original parameters. The original parameters of the evening were these: a dinner for 4 at Thornton's, one of Atlanta's finer restaurants, to celebrate my daughter Renee and her husband Marcus's 5th wedding anniversary. Renee had made the reservation 3 weeks in advance. She had chosen the restaurant carefully. Not the most expensive in Atlanta, but among them. The kind of place that required planning and communicated, through the planning, that the occasion mattered. 4 people. A celebration. A bill that would be significant but manageable. That was the plan. What happened was this. Harold and Constance Holt arrived with 6 additional people. Not Marcus's siblings. I knew Marcus's siblings and would have been glad to see them. 6 people I had never met. Introduced by Constance, with the breezy confidence of a woman who has never in her life considered that arriving somewhere with 6 unannounced guests might be an imposition. Business associates of Harold's. A couple from their country club. 2 people whose connection to the anniversary being celebrated was entirely unclear. They sat down. They ordered. Not cautiously, in the way of guests who understand they are unexpected additions to someone else's celebration. Comprehensively. 2 appetizers each. The lobster. 4 of them ordered the lobster, which was the most expensive item on the menu. 3 bottles of wine, the second and third chosen by Harold, with the particular authority of a man who treats every wine list as an opportunity to demonstrate his knowledge at someone else's expense. Renee sat across from me through all of it. I watched her face. I watched her do the arithmetic. I watched her understand, approximately 40 minutes into the expanded dinner, that the evening she had planned and saved for was no longer the evening that was happening. At 8:47, the server placed the bill folder on the table. Harold looked at it. Then he looked at Renee. He smiled. "You're paying, aren't you?" he said. Anniversary dinner and all. The table was quiet. I looked at Harold Holt. I looked at Constance, who was looking at her wine glass with the expression of a woman who has heard her husband say something she has heard him say many times and has long since stopped registering it as remarkable. I looked at Marcus, who had the expression he always had when his parents did something that required a response he didn't know how to give. And then I looked at Renee. My daughter's face was doing several things at once. The management of humiliation, which she had been practicing for 5 years of Sunday dinners and family gatherings, and the particular accumulated weight of being the woman Harold and Constance had never quite accepted as sufficient for their son. She reached for the bill. I put my hand over hers. "I'll take that," I said, and I reached into my pocket. And what happened next is the reason I'm telling this story. Before I tell you what I did when I reached into my pocket, I need to ask you something. If you had watched your daughter be humiliated, quietly, consistently, for 5 years, and then sat at a table while her father-in-law ordered 4 lobsters and 2 extra bottles of wine with 6 people nobody had invited, and then smiled at your daughter and said, "You're paying, aren't you?" What would you do? Would you say nothing because it was a family dinner? Would you confront Harold directly? Would you let Renee handle it herself? Or would you put your hand over your daughter's hand, reach into your pocket, and change the entire evening in a way that Harold Holt did not anticipate and will not forget? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one, and if this story is already finding something in you, if you have ever watched someone you love be treated as less than they are by people who should know better, please like this video and subscribe to Still Waters. New stories arrive here regularly, and every one of them runs deeper than you expect. Where are you watching from right now? And what time is it there? Let me take you back to the beginning. Because what I reached into my pocket for at 8:47 in the evening at Thornton's restaurant in Atlanta was not just a card. It was the conclusion of 5 years of watching, and the beginning of something Harold and Constance Holt had not been expecting. My name is Dorothy Mae Washington. I am 67 years old, and I have one daughter, Renee Louise, who was born in 1985 in Birmingham, Alabama, with her father's eyes and my particular stubbornness in a combination that has defined her, in the best possible way, for the 38 years since. Renee met Marcus Holt at a hospital fundraiser in Atlanta in 2014. She was 29, a cardiac nurse at Grady Memorial. He was 35, an architect whose firm had designed the hospital's new wing. They talked for 2 hours about architecture and nursing and what it meant to build things that lasted and whether the building was different when what you were building was intended to keep people alive. She called me the next morning. "Mama," she said, "I met someone. Tell me everything," I said. She told me everything. Marcus Holt was, by any measure I could apply, a good man. Thoughtful, direct, genuinely interested in Renee, in the way that some men are genuinely interested, and that is immediately distinguishable from the performance of interest that other men produce. He came from a family with money. His father, Harold, had built a commercial real estate portfolio in Atlanta over 40 years that was substantial, but he wore that background with the ease of someone who had decided early that it was context rather than identity. I liked him immediately. His parents were a different matter. Harold Holt was 71 years old, a compact man who carried himself with the particular authority of someone who has spent 4 decades being the person whose opinion organizes every room he enters. He was not unkind exactly. He was too controlled for unkindness, which requires a loss of control that Harold did not permit himself. He was precise. His assessments were communicated through the specific quality of his attention, its presence for the things he valued, and its calibrated absence for the things he did not. Constance Holt was 68, the particular kind of Atlanta society woman who has spent decades understanding that social positioning is a full-time occupation, and who brings to that occupation the focused professionalism that other women bring to their careers. She was warm in the performed way, the warmth of someone who has learned that warmth is the most effective social tool, and who deploys it with the precision of someone who never forgets it is a tool. The first time I met them was at a dinner. Marcus hosted 6 months into his relationship with Renee. Constance greeted Renee with a smile and a question. "Marcus tells me you're a nurse," she said. "Cardiac unit at Grady," Renee said. Constance nodded. "How demanding," she said. "It is," Renee said, and Constance moved on. I watched this from across the room. I noted the speed of the assessment, the particular efficiency of a woman who has determined what she needs to know about a person in the first 30 seconds, and has moved on because she has determined that more information is not necessary. I noted what the assessment contained, and I began, in the quiet way that mothers begin these things when they understand that something requires attention, to pay attention. Marcus and Renee married in June of 2019. The wedding was at a botanical garden in Atlanta, Renee's choice, which reflected Renee's taste, which was for things that were beautiful in a specific way, rather than impressive in a general one. Harold and Constance attended. They were gracious at the wedding in the way that people are gracious when the event is too public for anything other than graciousness. The years after the wedding were when the pattern became visible. Not dramatically, not with any single moment that could be pointed to as the beginning. The pattern emerged the way patterns emerge, through accumulation, through the consistent repetition of small things that individually might be dismissed, and that collectively told a story. The story was this. Harold and Constance Holt had decided that Renee was not the woman they had imagined for Marcus, and had organized their behavior toward her around that decision in the particular way of people who have made a determination and are managing its consequences without ever directly acknowledging the determination itself. They invited Marcus to events and mentioned, as an afterthought, that Renee was welcome to come. They referenced Marcus's accomplishments at family dinners and responded to Renee's with the particular brevity of people acknowledging something they are required to acknowledge. They asked Marcus about his work, and asked Renee, when they asked her anything, about logistics. Was the apartment comfortable? Had they found a good grocery store? Was the drive from their neighborhood to Grady manageable? Never about the work. Never about the thing that Renee had spent a decade building. The expertise, the relationships, the specific knowledge of what it meant to keep hearts beating in a cardiac unit at a major urban hospital. Never about Renee. Only about Renee's circumstances. As if she were context rather than person. The dinners were a specific pattern within the larger pattern. Harold and Constance liked restaurants. Expensive ones, which was appropriate given their means. They had favorite places, and they suggested these places for family dinners with the casual authority of people who have never considered that the cost might matter to someone at the table. They ordered extensively. They ordered wine. And the bill, consistently, found its way to Renee, not to Marcus, though Marcus was present and Marcus had income. To Renee, not explicitly, not with a direct instruction, but through the particular social choreography of a table at the end of a meal, Harold's attention elsewhere, Constance already reaching for her coat, the server approaching in the direction of the youngest woman at the table, who happened to be the daughter-in-law, who happened to be a cardiac nurse on a nurse's salary at a table of people with considerably more than a nurse's salary, who happened to have been raised to handle things without complaint. The first time it happened, Renee paid. The second time she paid. The fifth time she paid. The 10th time she paid. She did not tell me about all of them. She told me about some of them, in the particular way that daughters tell mothers about things they are managing and want witnessed but don't want fixed. Yet, I listened. I did not offer to fix it. Yet, I noted it. In the particular way I note things that require noting. The anniversary dinner was Renee's idea, and it was a good one. 5 years of marriage deserved celebration, and Thornton's was the right place for it. She had researched it carefully, understood what the celebration would cost, budgeted for it. She invited Harold and Constance because they were Marcus's parents, and the anniversary was a family occasion, and Renee was the kind of woman who extends the invitation, even when experience has taught her that the extension is complicated. She did not invite 6 additional people. Neither did Marcus. Harold brought them. With the casual authority of a man who has spent 71 years operating in a world that organizes itself around his preferences, and who has never developed the habit of considering that his preferences might impose on other people's plans. He arrived with 6 people and sat them down and ordered for the table, and the evening became something other than what Renee had planned. I was there because Renee had asked me to come. Not as a buffer, she was clear about that. She didn't want me there as protection. She wanted me there because it was her anniversary, and I was her mother, and she wanted her mother at the table. I came. I watched. I did the arithmetic, and at 8:47, when Harold looked at Renee and smiled and said, "You're paying, aren't you? Anniversary dinner and all." I put my hand over Renee's hand, and I reached into my pocket. I need to tell you what was in my pocket. Not the card itself. The card was a means to an end, and the end is what matters. But what the card represented, what it was connected to, why I had it with me that evening in Thornton's restaurant, and what I had known, when I put it in my pocket before I left my hotel room, that I was going to do with it. 3 months before the anniversary dinner, Renee called me on a Sunday afternoon. She had been crying. Not recently, not in the moment of the call, but recently enough that her voice carried the particular quality that follows crying when the crying has stopped, but the reason for it hasn't. "Mama," she said. "Tell me," I said. "We had dinner with Harold and Constance last night," she said, "at Pace's. Do you know what Pace's costs?" I knew what Pace's cost. "They ordered everything," she said. "Harold ordered the tasting menu for the table without asking. Constance ordered 2 bottles of wine. And when the bill came, she stopped. "You paid," I said. $480, she said, for 6 people, 2 of whom I had never met before that evening. And Marcus he didn't say anything. He looked at the bill and he didn't say anything, and I paid it because what was I going to do? I sat with that. "How many times," I asked, "has this happened?" She was quiet for a moment. "I've been keeping track," she said. "Tell me," I said. She told me. 14 dinners in 5 years. 14 dinners at which the bill had found its way to Renee by the particular choreography I have described. Harold's attention elsewhere, Constance reaching for her coat, the server approaching the youngest woman at the table. Total amount Renee had paid for Harold and Constance Holt's dinners in 5 years of marriage to their son, approximately $6,000, not including the anniversary dinner, which had not yet happened. I sat at my kitchen table in Birmingham with my coffee and the particular clarity that arrives when information that has been coming in pieces for a long time finally assembles itself into a complete picture. I thought about 14 dinners, about $6,000, about a cardiac nurse paying for her in-laws' meals at restaurants they had chosen and she had not been consulted about, and I thought about what I was going to do about it. Not immediately. The thinking required time, which I gave it, but the direction was clear before the afternoon was over. I was not going to let it happen at the anniversary dinner. Whatever that meant, and whatever it required, I was not going to sit at a table at Renee's anniversary dinner and watch Harold Holt look at my daughter and smile and tell her she was paying. That was the decision. The implementation required some planning. I called Bernard Walsh the following week. Bernard was my financial advisor in Birmingham, a man I had worked with for 20 years, who understood my situation completely, and who had, on more than one occasion, proven himself capable of moving quickly when a situation required it. "Bernard," I said, "I need a card." "What kind of card?" he said. "The kind," I said, "that covers a restaurant bill in Atlanta without a spending limit, and without any hesitation." He was quiet for a moment. "What's the occasion?" he asked. "My daughter's anniversary dinner," I said. Another pause. "How much are we talking about?" he asked. I told him about the 6 additional guests Harold was likely to bring. I had learned from Marcus, in a call the previous week, that his father was planning to invite some business associates to join the celebration, a detail Marcus had mentioned with the careful neutrality of a man who understands that the thing he is describing is not ideal, and who has decided that mentioning it neutrally is the appropriate response. I told Bernard about the lobster, which Thornton's was known for, and the wine list, which was extensive, and Harold Holt's particular relationship to wine lists. Bernard said, "I'll set up a card with a $10,000 single transaction limit, just in case." "Just in case," I said. He had the card to me by the end of the week. I put it in my jewelry box. And 3 months later, on the evening of Renee's 5th anniversary, I put it in my pocket, and I went to dinner. When Harold said, "You're paying, aren't you?" the table did the thing that tables do when someone says something that everyone understands is wrong and nobody is quite sure how to respond to. It went quiet. Not dramatically. Just quiet. The particular quiet of 10 people at a dinner table who have just heard something that has landed differently than the person who said it intended, or perhaps exactly as they intended, and who are each doing their own calculation about what the correct response is. Marcus was looking at his father. Not with anger. Marcus was not an angry man in the quick, visible way, but with the expression of a man who has watched something happen, that he has watched happen before, and who is, in this specific instance, finally running out of the patience required to continue watching it without responding. Renee's hand was on the bill folder. My hand was on Renee's hand. "I'll take that," I said. My voice was pleasant, conversational, the voice I used when I was saying something that required no elevation to achieve its effect. I reached into my pocket. I took out the card. I placed it on the bill folder. Then I looked at Harold. "Harold," I said. He looked at me with the expression of a man who has just been interrupted in a manner he did not anticipate by a person whose interruption he had not expected to matter. "Dorothy," he said. "I'd like to cover the bill this evening," I said, "as an anniversary gift. For Renee and Marcus." Harold's expression recalibrated. "That's very generous," he said. "But really, it's not a discussion," I said pleasantly. "It's a gift." A pause. I looked at the card on the bill folder. Then I looked at Harold. "I'm going to say something," I said, "and I want you to hear it clearly." The table was very quiet. "I have been at 14 dinners," I said, "over the past 5 years, at which Renee has paid for meals she did not plan, at tables she did not arrange, with guests she was not consulted about." Harold opened his mouth. 14, I said again. "I have the receipts. Approximately $6,000. The table was completely silent. Constance had stopped reaching for her coat. Marcus was looking at me with the expression of a man who is simultaneously surprised and not surprised at all. Renee was very still. "I am not telling you this to embarrass you," I said. "I am telling you because I think you may not have been paying attention to what you were doing, and I want to give you the opportunity to understand it clearly before I continue." Harold said nothing. I continued. "Renee is a cardiac nurse," I said. "She keeps hearts beating. She has been doing this for 15 years, and she is extraordinary at it, and it is hard work that pays a nurse's salary. That salary is sufficient for her life and her marriage, and the specific occasions she plans carefully, like this dinner. which she reserved 3 weeks ago and budgeted for and looked forward to. I paused. It is not sufficient, I said, for absorbing the cost of 14 unplanned dinners at Atlanta's finer restaurants over 5 years of marriage to your son. Harold said, Dorothy, I don't think... I put my hand up gently. He stopped. I am not asking you to agree with me, I said. I am asking you to hear me. Because I have been sitting at these tables for 5 years, watching my daughter manage this graciously and without complaint, and I have enormous respect for the grace with which she has managed it. But I am her mother. And mothers, at some point, say the thing that needs to be said. I looked at Harold steadily. You have a daughter-in-law who has given 5 years of her life to your family, I said. She shows up. She is kind to you. She loves your son. And she has paid $6,000 for your dinners, because the social architecture of how your family operates has consistently placed the bill in front of her. I picked up the card. Tonight, I said, I am placing it somewhere different. I handed the card to the server, who had appeared at the precise moment that served the story best, and who took it with the professional composure of someone who has seen many things at restaurant tables and has learned to process them efficiently. The table was very quiet. Harold looked at me. Then he looked at Renee. Then he looked at Marcus. Marcus said quietly, and with the particular directness of a man who has found his voice at the moment it was most necessary, Dad. She's right. Constance said nothing. She was looking at her wineglass, but something in her posture had changed. The composed self-assurance that had characterized her since she arrived with 6 uninvited guests had become something slightly more complicated, and the complication was visible even to people who did not know her well. Harold sat with the silence for a long moment. Then he said something I had not anticipated. He said, How much? I looked at him. How much, he said. Has she paid? Over 5 years. Approximately $6,000, I said. I can provide the specific figures if you would like. He was quiet. He looked at his wife. Constance was still looking at her wineglass. He looked at Marcus. Marcus held his father's gaze. Then Harold looked at Renee, and I want to be precise about what I saw when he looked at her, because I think precision matters in this moment. He did not look at her with the assessment he usually used. The quick, comprehensive look of a man determining where someone fits in his accounting of the world. He looked at her the way people look at things they have been looking at for a long time, and are only now seeing clearly. Renee, he said. She looked at him. He said, I owe you an apology. The table was absolutely still. I have not been. He stopped. I have not been paying attention to what I was doing. To the cost of it. Renee looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, Thank you for saying that. Those 4 words. Not, it's fine, because it wasn't fine. Not, don't worry about it, because there was something to worry about. Just, thank you for saying that. The precision of it. The particular grace of a woman who knows how to receive an apology without either dismissing it or weaponizing it. She had always had that grace. Harold nodded. The server returned with the card. I signed the receipt. The bill was $4,237. I put the card back in my pocket, and Constance, who had been looking at her wineglass through all of it, set the glass down and said very quietly to Renee, The reservation was thoughtful. The restaurant is beautiful. It was, Renee said. We should celebrate here again, Constance said. For the 10th anniversary. A pause. Just the 4 of us, she added. And something that had been in the wrong position for 5 years moved, very slightly, toward where it was supposed to be. Marcus drove me back to my hotel after dinner. We sat in the car in the hotel parking lot for a few minutes before I got out. He said, Dorothy, thank you. I looked at my son-in-law. He said, I should have said something, a long time ago. I watched it happen and I told myself it wasn't. He stopped. I told myself Renee was handling it, and that was true, but it wasn't sufficient. No, I said. It wasn't. He nodded. I'm going to have a conversation with my father, he said. A real one. Not at a restaurant. Good, I said. He looked at the hotel entrance. She never complained, he said, about the dinners. She just paid. I know, I said. He said, How did you know? About all of them? She told me, I said. Not all of them. Some of them. And I kept track. He looked at me. You kept track, he said. I'm her mother, I said. That's what mothers do. He nodded slowly. I got out of the car. I went to my room. I put the card back in my jewelry box. And I called Renee. She answered on the first ring. Mama, she said. Happy anniversary, sweetheart, I said. She laughed. The real kind. Marcus had the conversation with his father the following week. I know this because Renee told me. And Renee knew because Marcus told her. And Marcus told her because he had decided, in the parking lot of my hotel on the night of the anniversary dinner, that the things he had been watching without fully responding to were things he needed to fully respond to. The conversation happened on a Saturday at Harold and Constance's house in Buckhead. Marcus drove there alone. He was there for 2 hours. He told me about it afterward in broad terms, not because the details were secret, but because the details were his father's, and he was careful about what belonged to the conversation and what belonged to the telling of it. What he told me was this. Harold had listened. Harold had, in the particular way of a man who has spent 71 years being the person whose opinion matters, and who is now being required to hear something difficult from his son, received what Marcus said with the composure that was Harold's default. But he had listened, and at the end of the conversation he had said something to Marcus that Marcus repeated to Renee, and Renee repeated to me on a Sunday evening phone call. He said, I built everything I have by paying attention to the details. I stopped paying attention to the ones that mattered most. That was all. No elaboration. No explanation. No accounting of why or how or what had produced it. Just that. And Marcus had said, yes. And they had sat in Harold's study for a few more minutes, and Marcus had driven home. Constance called Renee 3 weeks after the anniversary dinner. Not Harold. Constance. She called on a Tuesday afternoon and she asked if Renee was free for lunch. Renee was free for lunch. They met at a restaurant that Constance chose, one of her usual places, though notably not the most expensive, a nice lunch place. The kind that costs what it costs and no more, Constance ordered simply. At the end of the lunch, she paid the bill, without comment, without making it a statement. She simply took the check when it arrived and paid it with the particular efficiency of someone who has decided something and is implementing the decision without requiring acknowledgement of the decision. Renee told me about this the following Sunday. She paid, Renee said. I know, I said. She didn't make it. She stopped. She just paid. Yes, I said. That's significant, isn't it? Renee said. I thought about Constance's composure and the particular precision with which she deployed it, and the specific meaning of choosing to deploy it in the direction of paying, rather than the direction of not paying. Yes, I said. That's significant. She asked me about work, Renee said. About the cardiac unit. She asked questions. Real ones. I sat with that. What did you tell her? Everything, Renee said. I talked for 20 minutes about the cardiac unit and she listened, and she asked follow-up questions and Renee stopped. She seemed interested. Actually interested. People can change, I said. Can they? Renee said. Or are they just behaving better? I thought about that honestly. Sometimes those are the same thing, I said. Behavior that is sustained long enough becomes character. The question is whether the behavior is sustained. A pause. I think she's going to try, Renee said. I think so too, I said. And if she doesn't? I smiled. Then we'll go back to the filing cabinet, I said. Renee laughed. The real kind. The dinner at Christmas was the first test. Harold and Constance hosted Christmas at their house in Buckhead the way they always had. The particular organized abundance of a family that has resources and applies them to the occasions that matter. The tree was enormous. The food was catered in a way that communicated abundance without effort. What was different was this. Harold poured the wine. At a certain point during the evening, he stood up and said he would like to say something. The room went quiet in the way that rooms go quiet when Harold Holt speaks. He said, I want to make a toast to Marcus and Renee, to 5 years, and to the next 5. And he paused. And to being paid attention to. And to paying attention back. He raised his glass. The room raised its glasses. Renee raised hers. I raised mine. And Harold Holt looked at his daughter-in-law across his Christmas dining room and nodded once. The specific, precise nod of a man who is communicating something directly without being required to elaborate on it. Renee nodded back, and the toast was made, and we had Christmas dinner. And at the end of it, Harold picked up the bill for the catered portion of the meal, a bill that had not been discussed, and that he paid without comment and without acknowledgement, and without any of the social choreography that had previously organized who paid for what. He simply paid it, and that, for now, was enough. The first anniversary of the anniversary dinner, the 6th anniversary of Renee and Marcus's marriage, was celebrated at a restaurant that Marcus chose, not Thornton's, a different restaurant, one neither of them had been to before, chosen for no reason other than that Marcus had read about it and thought Renee would like it, and made the reservation 3 weeks in advance. Just the two of them. Renee called me afterward. "Mama," she said. "Tell me," I said. She told me about the dinner, the food, the conversation, the particular ease of an evening that was exactly what it was supposed to be without anything additional arriving to complicate it. And then she said, "He paid." "Marcus?" I said. She laughed. "Yes. Obviously Marcus. But I meant..." She stopped. "I meant I didn't have to think about it. I didn't do the arithmetic while we were ordering. I just ordered what I wanted, and we ate, and it was our anniversary, and that was all it was. I sat with that. That's how it's supposed to feel," I said. "Yes," she said. A pause. "Mama," she said. "Yes? What did the bill come to?" "At Thornton's. The anniversary dinner. $4,237, I said. She was quiet for a moment. "Do you want it back?" she said. "I can." "It was a gift," I said. "Mama." "It was a gift for your anniversary," I said. "And it was worth every dollar." She was quiet. Then she said, "The card. The one you had in your pocket. How long had you been carrying it?" "Since 3 months before the dinner," I said. "So you knew," she said. "I suspected," I said. "Which is different. But yes." She was quiet for a long moment. She said, "Were you scared? That it wouldn't work? That he would just dismiss it?" I thought about Harold's face when he heard the word 14, when he heard the number 6,000, when he looked at Renee with the particular look of a man finally seeing something he had been looking at for 5 years. "No," I said. "Why not?" "Because," I said, "people who have spent their lives paying attention to the details respond when the details are made precise. Harold Holt built what he built by being precise. I gave him precise information in a language he understood." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "That's very calculated." "Yes," I said. "Is that a bad thing?" I thought about 30 years of managing household finances, about 14 dinners, about a card in a pocket and a number on a receipt. "No," I said. "It's not a bad thing. It's just knowing your audience." She laughed. "Mama," she said, "you're kind of terrifying." "I'm your mother," I said. "There's a difference." She laughed again. And I sat in my kitchen in Birmingham in the June evening and listened to my daughter laugh and thought about 5 years of Sunday dinners and 14 bills and $6,000 and one evening at Thornton's restaurant when I put my hand over my daughter's hand and reached into my pocket. And I thought, worth it. Every dollar. Worth it. There is something I want to tell you about the things we pay for quietly. Not just the restaurant bills, though those are real, and the arithmetic of them adds up in ways that are worth counting, but the larger things. The energy spent managing situations that should not require management. The emotional labor of absorbing things that should not need to be absorbed. The particular invisible cost of being the person who handles things graciously, because handling things graciously is what you do. These things have a price, not always a dollar amount, though sometimes, as in this case, the dollar amount is specific and documentable and amounts to $6,000 over 5 years of marriage, but always a cost. And the people who pay these costs quietly, who absorb and manage and handle without complaint, who do not present the receipts because presenting them feels like a violation of the grace with which they have been managing. These people are not always seen for what the quietness costs them. I want to say this clearly. The grace is admirable. The quietness is a choice that reflects something real about character. I am not suggesting that Renee should have made a scene at every dinner for 5 years, but I am suggesting that quietness, sustained long enough, can become invisible. And invisible costs are costs that continue. And the moment to make the invisible visible is not the moment that feels the most comfortable. It is the moment that is most necessary. At 8:47 on a Tuesday evening at Thornton's restaurant in Atlanta, the moment was necessary. I put my hand over my daughter's hand. I reached into my pocket. I made the invisible visible. With a card and a number and 14 dinners and $6,000 and the particular precision of a woman who had been counting. Because counting is what you do when you understand that the details matter and that someone needs to be keeping track of them. I want to tell you this because I think the people who have been absorbing things quietly deserve to know that someone can be keeping track. Not to punish, not to win, but to ensure that the quietness is seen. And when it is seen, when the number is said clearly and the details are made precise and the person who has been looking through you finally looks at you, something shifts. It doesn't fix everything. It doesn't repair 5 years in an evening. But it shifts. And shifts, sustained and consistent, become something more permanent. They become change. I want to ask you one last thing before we finish. Is there something you have been paying for quietly, absorbing, managing, handling with the grace that you have, that deserves to be made visible? And is there someone in your life who would put their hand over yours and reach into their pocket? Or are you the person who does that for someone else? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story found something in you, if it reached the person who has been keeping track and hasn't yet found the right moment, or the person who has someone keeping track for them, please like this video and subscribe to Still Waters. New stories arrive here regularly. Stories about the invisible costs and the moments when someone makes them visible. Those are the stories worth telling. And before you go, where are you watching from right now? What time is it there? Still waters run deep. Thank you for sitting with me in them.